Imagine spending a peaceful night under a canopy of stars, miles from civilization, only for silence to be broken by a haunting whisper. What would you do if a stranger emerged from the darkness, apologized, and then vanished? That's a question I still grapple with, even years after it happened. This story, the first of 3 deeply unsettling encounters, begins almost 8 years ago, when I was in my early 20s. I wasn't a seasoned survivalist, but I considered myself a capable camper, well-versed in the basics and comfortable in the wild. This particular trip took me deep into the remote wilderness of Idaho. It's a place teeming with life, beautiful yet formidable, home to both black bears and grizzlies. That kind of environment demands respect and preparation, which naturally deterred most casual hikers and campers. You rarely saw crowds up there, maybe the occasional tourist on a well-known trail, but even those popular spots weren't truly busy. I, however, preferred to vanish completely. For this trip, I'd chosen a lesser-known trail, one that wound through dense forest along the hills bordering a prominent mountain range, leading to a perfectly secluded, open spot with breathtaking views. The nearest recognizable trail, one leading to a small lake where I might have encountered other people, was a good 3 miles away, so I'd deliberately bypassed it. And I was right. My entire hike, not a soul. The path felt untouched, barely used. When I arrived at my chosen campsite, it was gloriously open and empty, just as I'd hoped. I set up my tent on the far side of the clearing, then meticulously gathered large stones for a sturdy fire pit. With about 2 or 3 hours of daylight left, my plan was simple: relax, soak in the solitude, and contemplate tomorrow's explorations. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in fiery hues, I built up a crackling fire, roasting marshmallows under a vast, star-dusted canvas. The whole valley settled into a profound quiet. Only a subtle breeze rustled through the pines, and the occasional distant call of wildlife pierced the stillness. It was perfect, pure, unadulterated peace. Until it wasn't it, a distinct, repeated crunching of leaves, unmistakably footsteps, broke the reverie. They were coming from the woods, just beyond the edge of my campsite. My body stiffened. My eyes locked onto the darkness. Who in the world would be out here, this deep in the wilderness, at this hour? My mind raced, grappling with the sheer impossibility of it. I was miles from anywhere, on an unused trail. Panic wasn't immediate, but a profound confusion, a deep sense of unease, certainly was. I just sat there, frozen, staring, as the sounds grew closer, until a figure emerged at the very edge of my campsite. It was a man. The flickering firelight cast dancing shadows, making it impossible to discern any clear features. All I could tell was that he had a typical hiking backpack slung over his shoulders. He simply stood there, a silent, dark silhouette, observing me, then scanning the rest of my campsite. My mouth opened, ready to ask, "Can I help you?" Or, "Are you lost?" But before I could utter a single word, he spoke. His voice was barely louder than a whisper, quiet, almost apologetic. "Sorry," he said. Just one word. "Sorry." Then, as abruptly as he appeared, he turned, melting back into the same dense woods he'd materialized from. His footsteps faded, quickly consumed by the returning silence. I sat there, marshmallows forgotten, fire crackling merrily, but the peace shattered. Sorry? What on earth was he sorry for? Was he lost? Was he looking for a campsite and stumbled upon mine? Why did he disappear without another word? Every fiber of my being screamed that this wasn't normal. It was unsettling. Profoundly so. Not overtly dangerous, not yet, but utterly bizarre. His behavior defied every expectation. Every interaction I'd ever had with other hikers. Would you have felt safe? What would your first thought be? Would you have chased after him? Asterisk, my mind churned, trying to rationalize what I had just witnessed. Maybe he was disoriented, I thought. Maybe he truly just stumbled upon me and apologized for the intrusion. I tried to convince myself that despite the unusual interruption, it was just a strange encounter, nothing more. I went back to stargazing, hoping wherever that guy was heading, he'd get there soon, and safely. But aside from that lingering, inexplicable sorry, I tried not to think too much more about it. What if, though, that first strange encounter was just a prelude? What if the same mysterious figure returned, but this time he was clearly terrified, paranoid, and asking if you were with her? That brief, unsettling whisper of sorry had faded, leaving me with a lingering sense of unease, but nothing I couldn't rationalize. I went back to stargazing, the warmth of the campfire a comforting bubble in the vast wilderness. Hours slipped by, or at least it felt that way. The moon and stars, which had been so brilliant, gradually vanished as thick, oppressive clouds began to roll in, swallowing the night sky and casting an even deeper, more profound shadow over the entire forest. I wasn't tired, not yet, but the stillness felt heavier now, more ominous. I sat by the dwindling fire, hoping boredom would eventually lull me to sleep. Then I heard it again. Footsteps. But this time, they weren't the slow, deliberate crunch of leaves from before. These were rushed, frantic, almost panicked footsteps, tearing through the woods from the exact same direction the man had vanished earlier. My heart hammered against my ribs. I stood, instantly on guard, a cold dread washing over me as the sounds grew closer, faster, and then he emerged into the faint light of my dying campfire. It was him, the same man, recognizable by his backpack and general build, but everything else about him was different. He pushed further into my campsite this time, far enough for the flickering flames to reveal him clearly. He had a medium, scruffy beard and oily, unkempt black hair plastered to his forehead. His clothes were torn, dirt-scuffed, and twigs clung to his disheveled form. His eyes were wide, bloodshot, dilated with sheer terror, yet his mouth was a grim, emotionless line. He looked like he'd been running for his life through hell itself. "Is everything okay?" I asked, my voice wavering despite my attempt at composure. "It's pretty late. You should have made it to your campsite by now." The man stood there, chest heaving, gulping air, but his gaze was constantly shifting, restless, like a cornered animal. His eyes darted over my right shoulder for a fleeting second, then locked back onto me. What was he looking at? Asterisk? Are you lost? Maybe I can help. I tried again, my offer feeling hollow in the face of his palpable distress. He muttered, "No," barely audible, claiming he was just hiking and didn't mean to bother me. But his words were slow, disjointed, and his eyes continued their frantic dance, constantly flicking to something just behind and to my right. Each time, they'd snap back to me, but that split-second glance was enough to send a fresh wave of unease through me. Listen, you look pretty nervous. I can help. Maybe send a radio message for you or whatever you need." I pushed, genuinely worried now, despite my creeping fear. He seemed to ignore me completely. Instead, his eyes, still wide with terror, suddenly locked onto mine with an intensity that made me flinch. His voice, though still quiet, was laced with an unsettling urgency. "You're camping here right now. Why?" The question was bizarre, chilling. His eyes darted to my right again, and this time, I couldn't resist. My head instinctively whipped over my shoulder, scanning the darkness. Nothing. Just the empty, silent woods. My heart hammered. I was getting truly creeped out, unsure how much more I wanted to engage with this man, let alone try to help him. Then he asked something even more disturbing, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. "Is it just you here? Are you alone? Where are the others?" The question hit me like a physical blow. Others? Asterisk, I hesitated, utterly taken aback. Before I could even formulate a response, he spoke again, his body tensing, his eyes narrowing, his paranoia escalating with every breath. "Have you been following me?" "No," I shot back, shaking my head. "No, I don't know what you're talking about." But his wide, hollow eyes had already shifted, locking onto something over my shoulder again. This time, they didn't snap back to me. They were fixed, staring, beyond me, into the impenetrable darkness of the forest. A primal fear seized me. He asked one last question, his voice barely a breath, filled with a raw, guttural terror that still haunts my nightmares. "Then why are you with her?" The words sliced through the air, sending an ice-cold shiver down my spine. With who? Asterisk. I instantly spun around, my eyes desperately searching the blackness behind me. Nothing. Still, just empty, dark woods. The silence was deafening, the only sound the frantic pounding in my ears. I whipped back to face the man. His face was a mask of pure, unadulterated terror, his gaze still fixed on that unseen presence beyond me. And then, as abruptly as he'd appeared, he broke. He turned, a frantic sprint carrying him deeper into the woods, away from the trail, away from everything. Within seconds, he was swallowed by the darkness, gone. My heart was still racing, my breath ragged. I spun around again, searching every shadow, every cluster of trees, trying to comprehend what the hell he had been talking about, what he had seen, in those brief, terrifying moments after he asked, "Then why are you with her?" I was convinced. I thought I'd connected everything, that this man was being followed, hunted by some woman or group out there in the depths of the wilderness. And when I'd looked over my shoulder, I'd fully expected to see her standing there, deranged and terrifying, ready to pounce. But there was nothing. Now, I didn't know what to believe. I was scared shitless. Absolutely, unequivocally terrified. There was no way I was staying there another second. My hands moved on autopilot, frantically gathering my gear, shoving everything into my backpack. I had to get out. Even though the man had run in the opposite direction from the main trail, I was on edge. Every muscle coiled. Every rustle of leaves, every subtle snap of a twig had me startled, convinced I'd see some woman, or whoever he was talking about, emerging from the shadows following me. But I never did. I made it to my car, shaking, and drove away. The next morning, the terror had subsided into a profound sense of worry. I pulled myself together enough to visit the local police station and file a report about the man, just in case. With more time to think about it, I was deeply concerned for him. I don't have an exact explanation for what went on that night, but after consulting with dozens of people over the years, I can offer a few theories. The most likely, and perhaps most tragic, explanation is that the man had been lost out there for a very long time. He was likely suffering from severe hunger, dehydration, and exposure, pushed to the brink of delirium and paranoia. His mind, breaking under the strain of the wilderness, may have conjured the idea of something or someone following him. Unfortunately, in that state, he couldn't recognize help when he saw it. He might have been so far gone that he didn't even know he was lost anymore, completely consumed by the delusion of whoever he thought was behind me. Can you imagine being so utterly alone, so desperate, that your own mind turns against you? Asterisk. However, there's another, far more terrifying possibility, one that still sends shivers down my spine. What if he was truly being followed? What if there was someone or something out there lurking in the dark, and he wasn't sure if I was a friend, a foe, or just another target? If that were the case, then his frantic, paranoid questions and his ultimate flight, while terrifying, might have inadvertently saved my life from whoever else was out there in those woods. We'll probably never know for sure. The man was never found or spotted again. It seems, tragically, he never made it out of the wilderness. While that night left me with lingering questions and a profound sense of unease about the wilderness, I couldn't have imagined that just a few months later, a different kind of terror would invade the sanctity and supposed safety of my own home. Your home is your sanctuary, a place of safety. But what if you suddenly realize someone else has been there, watching you from the shadows, for hours, without you ever knowing? That's what happened to me, and it redefined what safe meant forever. It was a normal Tuesday night, or so I thought. I had a mountain of work papers due, and frankly, I'd procrastinated a bit too long. So I braced myself for the inevitable, an all-nighter. My plan was simple: brew a pot of coffee, lock myself in my office upstairs, and power through until dawn. For the first few hours, it worked surprisingly well. I was in the zone, fueled by caffeine, typing away, the only sounds the quiet hum of my laptop and the occasional rustle of papers. But as the initial buzz wore off and my coffee cup emptied, the familiar drag of exhaustion started to set in. I figured a quick stretch, a walk downstairs to brew another pot, might reset my brain. I headed down to the kitchen, the quiet house feeling strangely still. As the coffee maker gurgled, a noticeable chill hit me, far colder than the ambient temperature in the rest of the house. It was like a cold breath, a subtle breeze snaking across the floor. My first thought was the heating system. I checked the thermostat. The heat was on, but the displayed temperature was several degrees lower than it should have been. A flicker of unease, then I started looking around, trying to pinpoint the source of the draft. That's when my eyes landed on it. The living room window, wide open. Not just cracked, but pulled completely open. A jolt went through me. I open my downstairs windows often during the day, especially for fresh air, but I am meticulous about closing them before dark. And I never leave them wide open like that, even if I did forget. The rational part of my brain immediately screamed, "Did someone open this? Did someone get in?" I approached it slowly, my heart starting to thump in uneven rhythm. I leaned out, scanning the ground beneath. No footprints in the dirt, no scuff marks on the windowsill, nothing to suggest a forced entry or a clumsy climb. My mind, desperate for normalcy, tried to dismiss it. "You're sleep-deprived. You must have just opened it wider than usual today and forgotten." It was the most logical, least terrifying explanation. I closed the window with a firm click, hoping to seal away the unsettling thought along with the cold air. Fresh coffee in hand, I went back upstairs, trying to refocus on my work. But the image of that wide-open window, the inexplicable cold, kept replaying in my mind. For the next 30 minutes, my concentration was shot. My brain kept nagging me. "Are you sure? You're alone?" The feeling was so persistent, so unnerving, that I finally gave in. I got up and did a quick, thorough sweep of the house. Every door locked, every window shut, every room empty. Nothing. A deep breath. "See, you're just tired. Everything's fine." I returned to my desk, feeling a fragile sense of reassurance, and plunged back into my papers. Another hour passed. My eyes were burning. My mind felt like static, but I was making progress. Then, a sudden, jarring thump. It came from directly behind me, loud and distinct. as if something heavy had fallen. My head snapped around, adrenaline instantly flushing through my system, but there was nothing there, just the wall. I knew my bedroom was directly on the other side of that wall. It had to be something in there, but what could make such a loud sound? And with the window incident still fresh in my mind, it was impossible to ignore. The fragile calm shattered. This was different. This wasn't a subtle cold draft or an open window I could rationalize away. This was a thump, a loud, physical presence. I stood up, my chair scraping against the floor, and slowly walked to the hallway, pushing open my bedroom door. I scanned the room from the doorway. Nothing. No overturned lamps. No fallen books. No clothes on the floor. Everything looked normal, unsettlingly so. How could such a loud noise leave absolutely no trace? I walked further in, my eyes meticulously searching every corner. Still nothing. Okay, I thought, this is it. The all-nighter is finally making me hallucinate sounds. I need sleep. I walked back to my office, trying to convince myself it was just exhaustion playing tricks. But for the next 15 minutes, focus was impossible. The thump echoed in my mind. It was so loud. How could it be nothing? Asterisk. My gaze kept drifting to the wall behind my desk, the source of the sound. As I stared, a sudden realization hit me. A wave of stupidity washed over me, immediately replaced by a surge of pure, unadulterated terror. There was a closet there. A small, thin closet I used only for storage. Old clothes, winter jackets, forgotten junk. I'd completely forgotten it even existed. And it was right there, directly behind my desk, where the thump came from. Curiosity, now tinged with a cold dread, compelled me. I walked over, my hand shaking slightly as I reached for the door. I carelessly slid it open, half expecting to find a stack of boxes that had toppled, or perhaps a heavy jacket that had slipped off a hanger. What I found stole my breath, ripped the air from my lungs in a violent gasp. I was face to face with a stranger. He was inches from me, pressed into the very back of the closet, hidden behind a thin curtain of old coats. His eyes, dark and unblinking, stared directly into mine. If not for the flimsy fabric separating us, he could have reached out and grabbed me before I even had a chance to react. The entire closet seemed to tear apart as he lunged, forcing his way out, lunging after me. I scrambled back, my scream caught in my throat, turning and bolting for the hallway. As I tripped and stumbled, clawing my way toward the stairs, a voice, gritty and low, pierced the air behind me. Alex. My name. He knew my name. It wasn't a question. It was a statement, chilling and possessive. A shiver, colder than any draft, ripped through me. I didn't recognize the voice, but the way he said my name, as if he owned it, as if he knew me, was a whole new level of terror. I made it out of the house in a blind panic, adrenaline surging through me. Thankfully, the man seemed more intent on trying to verbally stop me, to convince me to stay, rather than physically chasing me with full force. I didn't stop running until I burst through a neighbor's door down the street, hammering on it relentlessly until they answered and called the police. By the time the authorities arrived and searched my house, the man was gone. Not a trace, no sign of where he'd gone. Just an open living room window and the lingering, suffocating presence of someone who had been watching me, waiting. It meant that for likely over an hour, while I sat at my desk, trying to work, dismissing a cold draft and an open window as my own absent-mindedness, he was there, in my house, perhaps even in the very closet behind me. And worst of all, he knew my name. This wasn't a random break-in. It was personal. A stalker, a predator, meticulously planning, waiting for the perfect moment. Had I not pulled that all-nighter, had I gone to sleep as usual, I have no doubt I would not be here right now. Escaping that nightmare was a desperate act of survival, but the chilling truth of someone knowing my name, combined with the sheer audacity of that invasion, made me realize that some threats aren't just out there in the remote wilderness. Sometimes they follow you, even in familiar territory. You're walking home late at night on a familiar street, but then a car appears, disappears, only to reappear minutes later. Is it a coincidence? Or are you being targeted? This was not the kind of late-night dilemma I ever expected to face. This happened just a month ago, and the memory is still razor-sharp, cutting through any sense of safety I once had. It was a Saturday night, and I'd gone to a friend's birthday gathering. It was casual, just our close group. But as happens with good company, a couple of drinks turned into a few too many, and before I knew it, it was 1 a.m. Most people had either left or were crashing, but I hate sleeping anywhere but my own bed, and driving, even slightly tipsy, was out of the question. So, against what might have been my better judgment, I decided to walk the 25 to 30 minutes home. It wasn't a long distance, mostly quiet suburban streets I knew well. I bid my friends good night, stepped out into the crisp night air, and began my journey home. The night was eerily calm, the kind of stillness where every distant hum or rustle feels magnified. The whole neighborhood was asleep, no cars moving, no people out, not a single light on in any of the houses. Just me and the silent, shadowed streets. I was about halfway home when, from behind me, a pair of headlights suddenly appeared, cutting through the darkness. They weren't blindingly bright, and the car was moving slowly, almost hesitantly. As it drew closer, it rolled to a stop right beside me. The window cracked open, but with the ambient darkness and the minimal crack, I couldn't make out the driver at all. A man's voice, surprisingly calm and even-toned, called out, "Are you okay? Do you need a ride anywhere?" I quickly said I was fine, thanked him, and without another word or even a pause, the car drove off. I thought nothing of it. His voice sounded genuinely concerned, a thoughtful stranger just checking in. I kept walking, the rhythmic crunch of my shoes on the pavement filling the renewed silence. Another couple of minutes passed, and the quiet returned, unbroken. Then, a street sign up ahead reflected a light from behind me. My heart gave an involuntary lurch. I spun around, and there it was, the same car. This time, it was coming from the opposite direction, having clearly turned around. Instead of passing me, it pulled off to the side of the road, parking a little ways back. A cold knot tightened in my stomach. What were the chances? The same car, driving past me, then turning around, only to park as soon as it was back in view? It felt like too big a coincidence. My pace quickened, but I tried to appear casual. I kept walking, casting glances behind me, but the car remained stationary. The driver never got out. Eventually, it faded from my rear view, and I made it to the next section of the neighborhood. The logical part of my brain tried to dismiss it, to tell myself I was overthinking, that it was just a random occurrence. But the animal part of me, the one that screams when danger is near, was on high alert. Walking alone in the dead of night tends to make everything feel extra suspicious, doesn't it? I tried to shake off the unease. With every passing minute, the feeling started to subside, replaced by a cautious optimism. I was only about 10 minutes from my apartment now, the home stretch. But then, my eyes landed on something up ahead. Another car, parked, not on the side of the street, not at the curb, right in the middle of the road, headlights blazing. As I got closer, the sickening realization washed over me. It was unequivocally the same car, My throat went dry. The lump there felt like a stone. The chances of this being a coincidence had plummeted from slim to non-existent. There were only 2 main routes to my apartment from where I stood. Normally, I'd stick to this main road. It led me most of the way and was always well lit. But up ahead, there was also a park with a walking path that cut through the woods. I rarely used it at night because, unlike the street, it was completely unlit and notoriously dark. In that moment, a desperate calculation began in my mind. Was it less risky to walk past the car that was clearly watching me, that had been appearing and reappearing with unsettling persistence? Or was it safer to disappear into the dark, unlit woods? What would you do in that terrifying split second? My eyes darted between the car, parked like a predator waiting for its prey, and the shadowy, uninviting entrance to the wooded path. I started moving toward the path, a flicker of hope that I could slip away unseen. But as I drew closer, a new, chilling detail emerged. The car was parked strangely close to the entrance of the trail. It was just a little bit ahead of it, positioned in such a way that I could make it to the path before passing the car. But it almost seemed too perfect. The more I looked at the dark woods, the more a profound sense of dread washed over me. My gut screamed. It wasn't a choice between 2 bad options. It was a choice between what seemed obvious and what felt instinctively right. And my gut, thankfully, has always been my best alarm system. I had to go against what seemed like the logical escape route. I kept walking past the entrance to the woods, directly toward the menacing car. My heart hammered against my ribs, each beat echoing in the profound silence. I held my breath, bracing myself for whatever would happen as I drew parallel with it, but nothing did. I walked past, my eyes glued forward, then dared a quick glance through the windshield. And that's when the blood drained from my face. The car, which had been following me, parking deliberately in the middle of the road with its headlights on, was empty, utterly, disturbingly empty. For a few agonizing seconds, I was frozen, my mind trying to comprehend this new, terrifying development. Where was he? Then, I looked further back, toward the dark woods I had just resisted entering. And barely, just barely, through the thick, inky blackness between the trees, I could make out the unmistakable figure of a man, standing, watching me, from behind the very trees, along the very path I had almost taken. He wasn't in the car because he was already in position, waiting for me to walk into his trap. I didn't take another chance. I broke into an immediate, desperate sprint, my legs burning with adrenaline. I fumbled for my phone, pulling it out as I ran, holding it tight. And thankfully, that must have deterred him, because instead of hearing him give chase, I heard the distinct sound of a car door slamming, followed by tires screeching as he made a frantic U-turn and sped off into the night, disappearing as quickly as he'd appeared. I didn't stop running until I was safely inside my apartment, locking every door and window. The next morning, I reported what could only be described as an attempted kidnapping to the police. These 3 separate incidents, each a brush with the unknown, left me with more questions than answers. The sheer terror of narrowly escaping that meticulously laid trap still sends a shiver down my spine. That night, running through the streets, my heart hammering against my ribs, wasn't just about physical exertion. It was a desperate race against an unseen predator, a fight for my very safety and freedom. But as the adrenaline faded and the cold reality set in, I was left with a chilling understanding. These weren't isolated incidents. After experiencing 3 separate, inexplicable encounters with profound terror, from the depths of the wilderness to the supposed safety of my own home and familiar streets, one chilling question remains. Are these isolated incidents, Or is there a darker, unseen pattern at play? Let's try to make sense of the madness and what it means for our sense of safety, because honestly, I've been trying to figure it out for years. First, let's revisit that bewildering night in the Idaho wilderness. The man who whispered, "sorry," and vanished, only to return later, panicked and paranoid, asking if I was with her. What do you make of that? The most probable, and perhaps most tragic, theory I've heard, and one I tend to lean towards, is that he was simply lost, disoriented, and severely dehydrated or experiencing the early stages of hypothermia. The wilderness can play cruel tricks on the mind. Imagine being out there for days, running low on supplies, the cold seeping into your bones, your brain deprived of essential nutrients. Paranoia becomes a survival mechanism gone awry. He might have been hallucinating, seeing a phantom figure, her, tracking him. In that state, he probably didn't recognize me as a potential rescuer, but rather as another part of his terrifying delusion, someone else to be wary of. It's heartbreaking to think that I was right there, a source of potential help, and he fled further into his nightmare, possibly to his end. The image of him bolting into the dark, his eyes wide with a terror I couldn't comprehend, is something I can never shake. But then again, what if that asterisk wasn't asterisk it? What if he was actually being followed? What if she was real? And by scaring me, by making me leave, he inadvertently saved me from whatever was truly lurking in the shadows. Waiting? That possibility, however remote, adds another layer of profound unease to an already terrifying memory. It's the kind of chilling what if that keeps you up at night, staring at the ceiling, wondering about the true nature of the unknown. Then came the home invasion, the inexplicable cold draft, the wide open window, the thud from behind my office wall, all subtle whispers of an impending nightmare that my mind tried desperately to rationalize away. But the moment I flung open that closet door and came face to face with a stranger, inches from me, was a visceral violation of everything I considered safe. And then, the chilling whisper of my own name. That single word, Alex, was a visceral violation of everything I considered safe. Who was this person? How did he know my name? This wasn't some random, opportunistic break-in. This felt premeditated. He was watching me. He had been there, probably for hours, silently observing as I worked, a silent predator in my own sanctuary. The theory here is less ambiguous. This was a stalker, someone who had targeted me. The fact that he was so close, so deliberate, and then called out my name suggests a level of obsession that frankly makes my skin crawl. It means he wasn't just interested in my possessions, he was interested in me. The what if of this scenario is perhaps the most terrifying. What if I hadn't gone downstairs for coffee? What if I had just gone to sleep? I shudder to think about what his intentions were, and the thought that he's still out there, possibly watching, knowing my name, is a constant, low-level hum of anxiety. My home, once my fortress, now feels like a porous shell. And finally, the most recent encounter, the suburban stalker. That car, appearing and reappearing, playing a subtle, terrifying game of cat and mouse on what should have been a safe walk home. The critical decision point, the lit street versus the dark, unlit park path, felt like a life or death gamble. My gut screamed danger, and thankfully, for once, I listened. The sight of that empty car, parked strategically in the middle of the road, and then the figure of the man emerging from the dark woods, watching me, solidified it. This was an attempted kidnapping, a trap. He was waiting in the shadows of that park path, expecting me to take the obvious route to avoid him on the street. It was a calculated, predatory move. The theories here are grim. He was looking for a victim, and I happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. Or perhaps, like the home invader, he had singled me out. The chilling takeaway is how close I came to walking straight into his snare. My intuition, that primal voice of warning, saved me. But what if it hadn't? What if I had chosen the wooded path? The darkness, the isolation, the sheer predatory intent? It paints a picture of a nightmare from which there would have been no escape. Looking back at these three distinct, terrifying encounters, a common thread weaves through them all, a profound sense of vulnerability. Whether in the vast, untamed wilderness, the perceived safety of my own four walls, or the familiar suburban streets I'd walked countless times, safety proved to be an illusion. Each incident stripped away another layer of my naive belief in a predictable, safe world. The terrifying unknown is always present, sometimes manifesting as a lost, deluded soul, other times as a calculating stalker or a predatory kidnapper. These events have irrevocably changed me. I am hyper-aware of my surroundings, constantly scanning, questioning every shadow, every unexpected sound. The innocent trust I once had in the world, in people, is gone, replaced by a cautious vigilance. Sleep doesn't come as easily as it used to, and my sense of peace is often fleeting. The psychological toll is immense. It's a constant reminder that danger doesn't just exist in horror movies. It can emerge from the quietest corners of reality, shattering everything you thought you knew. But I'm not alone in these experiences. These stories, as terrifying as they are, serve as stark reminders of the unpredictable nature of the world. So now, I turn to you. After hearing about the man in the Idaho wilderness, the intruder in my home, and the predator on my walk home, what are your theories? Do you think the man in Idaho was truly delusional, or was there something else out there with him? What do you believe the home invader's true intentions were, and why did he know my name? And was the suburban stalker just a random opportunist, or something more? Share your thoughts, your own theories, or even your similar experiences in the comments below. Perhaps together, we can try to make a little more sense of these unsettling mysteries, because some questions, some fears, simply refuse to fade away.